Episode 5 of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms was insane. It was an incredibly raw, visceral episode complete with flashbacks, foreshadowing, and death. I mean, what else could you expect from the climax being a bloody 7v7 trial by combat? A lot happened here, and this video is full on spoilers, but I want to talk about a defining moment that Dunk had during the trial of 7. To me, it wasn't when he started fighting. It wasn't when he got up the first time, nor the second time, showing that for some reason he had like 10 lives. It was when he removed his helmet. At first, I dismissed the moment as him just removing it because he couldn't see. But looking at the entire episode as a whole, and a key blink and you'll miss it moment in the previous episode, I think him removing his helmet was very symbolic. In the previous episode, Raymond the Fossaway's squire requests Ser Duncan to knight him so that he can help in the trial of 7. Duncan hesitates, so Lionel takes charge and does it instead. And then, as Dunk is knelt, we get a quick flashback of Ser Arlen standing over him and shrugging. This simple scene is surprisingly meaningful for how short it is. First, that shrug meant Arlen didn't say the knighting words, so Dunk didn't know what he's supposed to say were he to knight Raymond properly. Second, that meant Dunk was never officially knighted, which makes this whole thing a sham. Looking back on the scene where Dunk first tries to get listed, he at first doesn't have a chance to directly answer the guy's question of, "Are you a knight?" Then he just asks for his name and Dunk says Duncan, then remembers to add on the Sir. He claims that Ser Arlen knighted him as he was dying with his own sword, but there were no witnesses to the dubbing. Now at the time, the guy was more skeptical of Ser Arlen's actual existence than the fact that Duncan was actually knighted. Dunk had to find someone that knew Ser Arlen, so the question of his actual knighthood was sidelined and forgotten. And past a certain point, once he'd gotten into the good graces of Lionel Baratheon, befriended some of the men at camp, and even came face to face with Baelor to resolve his legitimacy in the lists, it didn't even matter that he wasn't officially dubbed. Everyone, including Baelor, recognized him as an honorable knight with a will to protect the weak and innocent. They didn't really need to question whether Arlen dubbed Dunk or not until the moment of this flashback, which only us viewers are privy to. A shrug and no coherent words, similar to a lot of the other flashbacks Dunk had of Ser Arlen. And so, as it turns out, Dunk had been faking his knight status this entire time. I expected the 5th episode to have a lot of bloody, fierce fighting and possibly death. What I didn't expect was a whole lot of flashback, more than anything we'd seen in previous episodes. A good chunk of episode 5 is spent showing Dunk's time in Fleabottom, where he had to steal from corpses to barter for coin. He and his companion Rafe were trying to save enough money for passage to the free cities. Rafe is a sharp contrast to Dunk, and honestly, kind of what you'd expect from someone who grew up in the slums. She's sharp, opportunistic, spiteful, and has quick hands. Dunk, on the other hand, isn't sneaky at all, is the one to tell her to back down in situations she clearly can't win, and just appears overall timid by comparison. This is pretty in line with what we've seen of Dunk in adulthood. Yes, he's gotten a bit braver with more initiative to protect, but then and now, he's not inherently violent or spiteful. Everything goes wrong when Dunk and Rafe are cornered by 2 men. In this scene, Rafe dies, and Dunk is barely able to do anything. It looks like the end for him too, until an incredibly drunk Ser Arlen bursts in and absolutely fucks these guys up. Dunk is in awe, and you just know that his loyalty is solidified from that moment. Until this point, I had kind of questioned why Dunk's loyalty to Ser Arlen was so deep. In earlier episodes, Dunk said he was grateful for the life Ser Arlen gave him, but a lot of those flashbacks involved Ser Arlen drinking and hitting him. They even showed Dunk asking Ser Arlen if he means for him to be a knight, and Ser Arlen doesn't answer. Obviously, a journeying life with food and a master to watch over you is something to be grateful for, but Dunk's gratitude finally seems deserved when we get the full context of Ser Arlen saving him from a certain violent death. What's funny is that Dunk is still too timid to actually meet Ser Arlen face to face, so he kind of just follows him everywhere until he gets sick, and Ser Arlen tells him to get up.
Get up.
And he does. Anyway, these flashbacks show that these are Duncan's roots. He's very much still the same Fleabottom boy inside, but he's gained some courage to actually, finally, fight back. Throughout the first half of the fight, Duncan is trying and mostly failing. He probably isn't actually used to fighting in all that armor, and we know Arlen likely didn't teach him that well. He's clumsy and can barely land a hit. His opponent, while smaller, is obviously better trained. Arian's sword technique is well above his, almost dancing around him and poking at the chainmail instead of slashing at it. He even gets into the slit of Duncan's helmet, hitting his eye. Then Duncan removes his helmet, and he starts to fight like a beast. While again, him removing his helmet might have just been to see better, it's a pretty crazy thing to do in a fight like this, leaving your head unprotected. But here, it's like he was shedding the knight's armor because it hindered him, and because it's just not him. For a moment, Dunk stops pretending to be a knight, or even someone raised like one. He's going back to his Fleabottom roots of just being a kid in the slums with no protection, except now he's learning to fight for his life and against injustice, which he couldn't do before. For all the time spent in the earlier episodes trying to prove himself a knight, Dunk is able to fight hardest when he stops pretending to be one. This is when he finally lands a hit, a crazy slash that's a callback to Egg telling Dunk what Arian used to do to him. Dunk fights like a madman. And even though he falls again, he gets up and just beats the shit out of Arian until he yields. It's the least knightly kind of fist fight you could imagine, because Dunk's roots aren't knightly at all. The way he drags Arian to the stadium is hilariously unceremonious as well, but it gets the job done and seals the deal. Dunk's story separates knighthood as an ideal and knighthood as a social status. People doubt his status as a knight again and again because he doesn't talk like one, act like one, and in the end, barely even fights like one. But it's clear to anyone that meets him that Dunk has all the ideals of a knight. Throughout the series, we see his ideals overcoming his status or lack thereof. And in an environment where rank and status is everything, it's wonderful to see ideals being rewarded, in his case at least. Now, this is kind of a segue, but since this is also kind of my post-episode reaction video, I just wanted to throw this in there. Baylor's effort to do the honorable knightly thing obviously didn't turn out well for him. I guess they can't all be winners. Baylor's death is something I'm curious to examine after the next episode, which is also the season finale, by the way, because that's when the aftermath and consequences of it all reveal themselves. But what I kind of just wanted to point out here was Lionel's insane foreshadowing of both Baylor and Dunk. He says, "No man fights so fierce as one neglected by his mother." Lionel clocks Baylor as the mama's boy. A shame, he says. In his head, Lionel was probably like, oh, this one's definitely going to die. And he was right. Because Baylor's killer is indeed his brother Makar, who was probably the more neglected by their mother between the two. At the same time, it's revealed in the Fleabottom flashback that Dunk lost his mother quite some time ago. While it's maybe not the same as being neglected in comparison to a sibling, I think Lionel's statement still applies, where Dunk grew up without a mother and eventually revealed an incredibly fierce fighter. This episode was called In the Name of the Mother, and while that probably alludes to the knighting ceremonial words saying, "In the name of the mother, I charge you to protect the young and innocent," they snuck that theme of mother quite well into how they foreshadowed the outcomes of the battle, despite not even having any mother characters visible on screen. Anyway, this episode is now rated the highest of the series according to IMDb. It didn't feel like your typical climactic battle since this was ridden with flashbacks, mess, and mud. Though our protagonist won, this battle didn't feel glorious. It felt real. That, and how well it dug into Duncan's character, made it genuinely satisfying. I can't wait for the next episode to examine the crazy gut punch of Baylor's death and see what comes next for our dear Dunk and Egg.